Michael Ward is 25 years old. After qualifying in the UK, he heads straight to the North Sea where he meets Tony Prangley. Tony is 28 and like Michael, he wants the adventure and high pay of a relatively new and dangerous occupation. Michael and Tony are saturation divers in the North Sea. The North Sea oil field is a large offshore oil and gas reserve located in the North Sea basin between the coastlines of Norway, Denmark and the United Kingdom. It was discovered in the late 1960s and it's been a major producer of oil and gas ever since. By 1978, just over 2,000 divers work in the North Sea. They're paid around $5,000 a month. In today's money, that's around $23,000 a month. The high pay is relative to the risk of the job. Michael and Tony are on board the Star Canopus. The MS Star Canopus is a diving support vessel, or DSV, used in the offshore oil and gas industry. It's a dynamically positioned vessel. A dynamically positioned vessel automatically maintains its position by using thrusters located around the ship. The system is computer controlled and uses sensors to provide information to the computer about the vessel's position. The technology is designed to keep large vessels stationary against the elements. She's equipped with a 12-man saturation diving system which allows divers to work at depths up to 900 feet. The dive bell descends through a moon pool, which is a large opening in the hull of the vessel that allows divers to enter and exit the water while the vessel is stationary. She has accommodation for 81 personnel and stays at sea for about 45 days at a time. And so Michael and Tony are living inside the saturation habitat with 10 other men who rotate shifts to work around the clock. On November the 26th, 1978, the Star Canopus is dynamically positioned on the northeast side of the Beryl Alpha platform. The Beryl Alpha oil platform is a fixed steel structure in the UK sector of the North Sea, around 208 miles northeast of Aberdeen, Scotland. Installed in 1975, it's owned and operated by Apache North Sea Limited. The platform's located in the Beryl oil field, which is one of the largest oil fields in the North Sea. Oil production has declined throughout the year, and with winter conditions approaching, underwater work has fallen behind schedule. They've got some catching up to do, and a calm weather window gives them an opportunity to make up some lost time. Tony and Michael wait patiently, ready to go in the water when they're told. They pass the time playing cards and reading books. Reading isn't that easy when your body is under such extreme pressure, but the young men need a way to pass the time. They're effectively locked in a coffin for 28 days with a group of men all fighting to stay sane and pass their time until they can get back to their families. They work 1 month on and 1 month off. The captain of the Star Canopus, Roy Forsyth, listens into the weather forecast. The London Weather Centre has predicted gusts of 40 knots between 1900 and midnight. The Star Canopus is only a year old, and although she's got the latest and best technology for the time, the limits of its dynamic positioning system are 18 to 20 knots with the wind hitting its broadside, and so Captain Forsyth has terminated diving operations. The Star Canopus experiences squalls reaching 40 knots at 20:30 and again at 22:45, causing her to be blown off her position. But by the 12-hour shift change at midnight, weather conditions have improved when Diving Supervisor Robert Kelly comes on duty. Diving Superintendent Ed Hammond tells Kelly that the weather's improved and to get the divers back in the water. Kelly tells Michael and Tony to get themselves ready. Near the Beryl Alpha platform where Star Canopus is working is the Hakon Magnus, a Norwegian semi-submersible. She's a deep water drilling rig designed to operate in harsh environments like the North Sea. The rig is 380 feet long and 290 feet wide. As a semi-submersible, she's a floating platform. By filling her pontoons with water, she's relatively stable in the rough seas. To hold her position, she has huge anchor chains that extend out from all four corners. The wind is slowing and now the wind speed indicator fluctuates between 15 and 20 knots. Kelly confirms with the ship's captain and dive superintendent that the weather is suitable for diving, and at 02:40 he launches the bell with Tony Prangley and Michael Ward inside. The dive bell descends down a hoist wire hanging through the moon pool from the Star Canopus. At 03:12, Michael locks out, which means he's in the water. His job for the day is to connect a 6-inch pipe to the riser that carries oil up to the platform at the surface. Tony provides support to Michael from inside the dive bell. He'll spool out Michael's umbilical, make sure the gas is flowing properly, and monitor Michael's communications. Michael finds the pipe sticking out from the wall of the concrete base and gets to work connecting the riser. 8 minutes later, Captain Forsyth calls Kelly in the dive control center to tell him there's a squall approaching on the ship's radar. Kelly orders Michael back to the bell, where he then sits for the next 40 minutes. At 0400, Michael is back on the job. Then at 0545, the wind suddenly shifts direction and begins blowing from the north at a speed of 40 knots, hitting the star Canopus on her beam, which overpowers her dynamic positioning system. The wind arrives without much warning, and unlike a sudden gust of wind which then dies down, it starts blowing at 40 knots and doesn't stop. In dive control, Supervisor Kelly is at the control panel when an amber warning light and the diver alarm activates. Captain Forsyth orders the divers back to the bell. Kelly relays the message to Michael, who stops what he's doing and swims back to the bell. In the trunking, he takes off his helmet as Tony starts to stow the umbilical. At the surface, the force of the wind blows the star Canopus sideways against an overhang on the Beryl Alpha platform. The ship's mast snaps and crashes onto the deck. At the same time, the wind drives the ship backwards towards the Hakon Magnus. Captain Forsyth quickly takes the ship off dynamic positioning and tries to swing the bow outward to keep the vessel from crashing into the submerged pontoons of the Magnus. He then presses the dive abort alarm and calls dive control. In dive control, Kelly waits for Tony and Michael to seal the bell when the red dive abort indicator lights up. Captain Forsyth calls Kelly again to tell him he needs to get the divers back in the bell. Kelly calls down to the bell and Tony tells him they're having problems pulling in Michael's umbilical. It's snagged on something outside the bell. He doesn't know what, but there's no way to shut the hatch until the umbilical's cleared. Michael wants to lock out to fix the problem, but Kelly won't allow it. Instead, he tells Michael to throw the dive helmets out the bell in the hope it will dislodge the line and try again. But it doesn't work. Meanwhile, Kelly gets another urgent message from Captain Forsyth asking if he's started pulling up the bell yet. Kelly explains the delay and says he'll notify the bridge when he starts the recovery. He tells Michael and Tony to cut the hose, and quick. For what seems like an eternity, the bell smashes against the base of the platform. Tony and Michael cut the hose as quickly as they can and seal the bell, then notify topside. In dive control, Kelly watches Michael and Tony on the video monitor while the bell is raised. Tony calls out the depth every 33 feet. When the bell is 100 feet from the surface, Tony suddenly stands up, waves his fist shoulder high, and shouts, "All stop." On the monitor, it looks like he's listening to something. Kelly does as he's told. From dive control, he's got a clear view of the moon pool. He can see something's wrong. The bell umbilical and the clump weight guide wires aren't hanging straight down through the moon pool. They're leaning towards the bow of the ship. The trolley that the wires hang from is violently shaking and vibrating. Then he loses the video feed to the divers. The star Canopus has been blown across the path of a Hakon Magnus anchor chain. All lines from the ship to the dive bells are severed. The life support umbilical, the main lift wire, and the clump weight guide wire, which is their recovery system. The bell, with Tony and Michael inside, drops to the seabed below. The clump weight rapidly pulls them down to 300 feet. They hit the seabed hard. They rattled, but not injured. This was not how they thought their day would go. With their hot water supply disconnected, the bell's internal temperature begins to drop rapidly. Michael and Tony are cut off from the ship. Now they have to act on their own. First, they have to make sure they can stay as warm as possible. That means standing or sitting away from the walls of the bell, which would quickly pull heat away from their body. Then they need to decide if they should release the clump weight. Their training is to sit tight and wait for rescue, but they're cut off. They don't know if the ship will find them, and they know the ship has its own set of problems. But if they release the clump weight and they float up to the surface, it's possible the current takes them away from the ship and then they're lost at sea. They decide to sit tight and preserve their energy. If rescuers don't arrive soon, then they can release the drop weight and surface the bell. But Tony and Michael can't release the weight from inside the bell because it's locked to the outer frame of the bell. The bell doesn't have a stage, which is a platform underneath the dive bell that creates some space between the hatch of the bell and the seabed. They sit tight and try to keep warm. 1 hour passes, then another. They're getting really cold. They know that the only way they can release the clump weight is by swimming out into the freezing water. If they don't go soon, then they won't have high enough body temperature to make it back into the bell alive. So they decide to open the hatch and release the clump weight. They turn the bolts that seal the hatch shut and open the hatch inwards. Their hearts sink. The hatch is blocked. The bell is sitting on the sand and there's no way out. Back at the surface, a rescue plan is being developed. It becomes clear that the bell doesn't have a strobe flash, which could help rescue divers find it in the dark. And the crew of the Star Canopus have removed the bell transponder some time before the dive. A transponder is a piece of kit that lets off a signal to help a rescue party locate its position. This also happened in the Wild Rake diving accident. I'll leave a link to that video for you to watch later. When a dive bell is lost, the diving support vessel has a number of tools to locate and rescue it. But the Star Canopus has already been damaged and now she's fighting strong winds. Normally she could use sonar equipment to search the surrounding area for a signal from the lost bell's transponder. But the transponder's been removed, so she needs help to find and recover her lost bell. Coming to her aid are Intersub 4 and the Uncle John. Intersub 4 is a ship owned by a company called International Submarines. She brings in an ROV to search for the lost bell and she has a saturation dive team on board. Uncle John is a semi-submersible oil platform, a smaller version of the Hakon Magnus. Between the howling wind and navigating around the Hakon Magnus anchor chains, it takes 4.5 hours to find the bell. A dive team descends from Intersub 4. They know the general area the bell has landed, and now the divers need to locate her and guide the crane hoist wire to the bell. After a number of attempts, they finally secure the hoist wire. Over 13 hours has passed when they start the lift. The bell pulls away from the seafloor, and as it comes free, Michael Ward's limp body drops out of the trunking of the bell and starts to float up to the surface. When the bell finally reaches the surface and Michael's body is found, both divers are dead. It's not clear if they were both dead before the lift, but because Michael went in the water, the coroner report states death by drowning, and Tony Prangley died of hypothermia.